Hey guys, how's it going? I do not have time to film this video in like an appropriate location, so it's happening in my car. And of course, I forgot the mic, so now I'm like screaming at you, and I apologize for that. To start off, you will need cotton, 100% cotton yarn, and a number 4 weight, which is also known as worsted weight. Now, the reason I'm having you use cotton is because it's going to create a little more friction on your knitting needles so that you don't drop your stitches as you're learning how to knit. If you have acrylic laying around, feel free to use it, but I really think cotton is probably the better way to go. There's a second reason for that also. And that reason is that it won't melt. So a lot of first knitting projects are actually, for the kitchen and the bath. And so there'll be pot holders and trivets and face scrubs and washcloths, dishcloths, that kind of stuff. Acrylic yarn, since it's essentially made out of plastic, will melt. It will also repel water, which is the opposite thing you want if you're trying to use something as a dishcloth or a washcloth. So, cotton is great for trivets, great for washcloths, great for pot holders. You can use it for all those things. So, that's why I want you to use cotton, because there's going to be a pattern that goes along with the tutorials, and it will most likely be something like a trivet or a washcloth or a pot holder, because those give you a quick sense of satisfaction, and I want you to feel that to show you are learning. So, cotton, 100% size 4, in a light color. The light color is important. If you get a dark color yarn, you will be unable to see, or at least it will be harder to see, where your needles are supposed to go. And for a new knitter, that can be really frustrating, and it can strain your eyes and make you sore because you'd be all hunched over your work trying to see what you're doing. So picking a light color yarn will make it a lot easier while you're learning. It doesn't have to be this brand. It just needs to be number 4, 100% worsted weight cotton. Next, you're going to need knitting needles. I suggest bamboo. And these are 5 millimeters, and you want 5 millimeters or maybe 6. I wouldn't go much bigger than that. And bamboo is great in combination with cotton because it's going to create that friction I was talking about to keep the stitches from falling off your needles, or at least make it less likely that they do. So bamboo straight knitting needles, 5 millimeter in size, or 6 is okay too, probably. 5 will create a better fabric probably, but 6 will work if that's all you can find. And cotton yarn, make a great combination for learning light colored. Additionally, you will need scissors to cut the yarn, a tapestry needle to weave in your ends, or some brands call it an actual yarn needle, but it's the thick kind with the blunt tip on it. And it will be helpful if you had stitch markers and a progress keeper. So stitch markers are hoops like this, and they're not always round. There's triangle ones and there's square ones, but the purpose of these is to go on your knitting needles between your stitches to indicate when there's a change in your pattern. So 2 of these is what I recommend having. You do not need to buy these. Little rubber bands work, hair ties work. You can take a piece of yarn and tie it into a little circle. So long as it's something that won't catch on your yarn, it'll work just fine. These are not that expensive. You can find them at Michael's and Joann's and maybe even your Walmart. But if you don't want to spend the money, you don't have to. There will be something laying in around the house, I promise you, that you can use. Okay, 2 stitch markers, and a progress keeper. This is a progress keeper. I have collected several over the years that are pretty cute. This is a strawberry dipped in chocolate. But the purpose of this is twofold. One, you can place it on right below your needles when you start working on your project, and as you knit, it will go farther down so that at the end of the session of knitting, you can see where your progress was for that, which is, you know, pretty satisfying to see how far you got. Sometimes not satisfying to see you just knitted 2 hours and you only got so far, but it marks your progress. The other reason for having this is that it can mark the front of your work. And when you start knitting, and even depending on the fabric, sometimes if you're a practice knitter, you will discover that you cannot tell the back of the work from the front of the work. So this will make it so you always know what's the front side of your work. Now, again, this is not something you have to buy. You can see it has this little claw clasp on it, and a safety pin will work. Also, just a piece of yarn thread through and tied in a bow on the front side will work, because the main reason we're going to be using this is to mark the front of your work, since you guys are beginning knitters. Last, and this is not critical, but you'll be very frustrated if your stitches fall off of your needles when you put it away for the night, or you know, you have to travel with it and you open your bag and then you're like, oh man, I just lost five of my stitches off the needles. These are little caps, and they're stoppers for your needles so that your stitches can't fall off. Now, again, you do not have to buy these. Most people have something in their house that they can put on the end of their needles to prevent the stitches from dropping off when they put their work away for the day. You can use hair ties and put them around the end of your needles and just, you know, wrap it up. That'll keep them from falling off. Or a rubber band would work also. Just put your needles together and rubber band around the end of them. So you do not need to go and buy those caps. The caps, again, are found at places like Joann's and Michael's and Walmart. They are relatively inexpensive, but you know, when you're starting out a new hobby, these things can all add up. So usually you can find something to cut your yarn, something to keep your stitches falling off the needles, something to mark the front of your work, and something to use as stitch markers around your house if you need to do that. What you will probably have to buy are the needles and the yarn. Those things you probably can't get around buying unless you've tried to do this in the past. I really hope you get some value out of these tutorials. I hope I've shown you ways to make it affordable. If you would like to stop watching right now, I totally understand it. You know everything you need now that you're going to need to knit the pattern that's going to be in the upcoming tutorials. I appreciate you being here. If you want to like, and if you subscribe, of course, you'll know when the tutorials come out so you can learn Continental Knitting and Norwegian purling. However, if you want to stick around, it's time to cover the things that I think personally you don't actually need right up front that you will see advertised. The first two of those items are a swift and a ball winder. Now, these items are very convenient once you know you are going to be a lifelong knitter. You will find that as your knitting skills grow, you may start purchasing yarn that comes in skeins instead of balls like this. And when you purchase a skein of yarn, you can't really work from it that way. You need to put it on a swift and then wind it onto the ball winder to really make it convenient to use. Now, you still, even at that point, if you don't want to spend the money, have to have those things. If you have a friend willing to put the skein of yarn on their arms like this while you manually wind it, that will work. a lot of people did that back in the day. If you have a dining room chair or a kitchen chair that has a long back, you can put it around the back and wind off of that into a ball. Or if you are agile enough, you can put it around your knees if you sit with your knees up towards you, like on a sofa or recliner, and you can wind off of your knees. So even if you reach the point where you're using yarn that comes in skeins, you don't have to have a ball winder and a Swift. However, at that point, it is much more convenient to have it. So I'm not saying these are things you never need to own. I'm just saying as a beginning knitter, you're going to most likely be buying yarn that comes in a ball already. And you really just don't have a need for those two items. And they're fairly expensive as far as knitting tools go. So I would suggest holding off on those. Number three of an item that I feel will be advertised at you that you do not need is a yarn minder. Now, a yarn minder is called many different things, but in general, the purpose of it is to keep your yarn from getting messy while you use it, to keep it in one place so it's not rolling around the table, and to maybe make it smoother as you pull it out to work with it. I personally just throw my yarn in a bowl. I might even have it with me. I usually don't. I do. Okay. I brought my giant bag with me because I knew I would need to show you some things. And it has my yarn bowl in it. So this is just kind of a heavy bowl. It's just a bowl. It's meant to be like a cereal bowl in your kitchen. There is nothing too dramatic about it. But I put my yarn in the bowl, and then literally I just pull. And it doesn't roll around everywhere, and it comes out super smooth, and I didn't have to buy anything special because that's a bowl I had. So I personally don't see the need for a yarn minder, but like I said, as your knit skills improve, you may find it's something you want to try. I know there are other people who like it. I definitely don't think it's something you need as a new knitter. What are we on? Number 4? Number 4 of things I think that you absolutely do not need to buy as a new knitter. And that 4th thing, let me think for a minute, would be hand-dyed yarn. Now, this is something that I know you're going to want to buy if you have the funds to spend on it. I want, when you see hand-dyed, these beautiful skeins of hand-dyed yarn, of course you want to buy them. They are squishy. The colors are usually fantastic. You get to support a small business. But here's the thing. Most of them are much more expensive than buying this cotton yarn. A full skein of hand-dyed yarn in fingering weight, which is what you'll typically find it in. Now, I don't want to say typically. You can find it in any weight, but a lot of patterns for hand-dyed yarn, I would say the most popular weight is fingering, followed by sport, which is a little thicker than this. So it's harder to work with if you're a new knitter. When you are starting to knit until you are very comfortable with the stitches and ready to really start your first pattern that you want to invest in, I would avoid buying hand-dyed. Thank you, that was loud. I would avoid buying hand-dyed yarn simply because of the expense, the learning curve on maybe using a fingering weight yarn or a thicker yarn, and the care instructions, because many of these are in wool and nylon or wool and silk blends. You cannot just throw wool in your washing machine or throw wool in your dryer. You will start out with something this big and it will come out this big. Now cotton, of course, it can shrink. Everybody knows cotton shrinks. But if you make a washcloth and it shrinks, that's not that big a deal. Most people will purposefully know that this is going to shrink, make it a little bigger than they intended, and accept the consequences of that because they want to be able to use their hot pad holders or their washcloths in a way that allows them to throw it in the washer and dryer. Hand-dyed yarn, you simply have to take better care of. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be willing to put in the time and the effort to care for it. So some people will argue that point and say, buy the yarn you love and learn how to use it. But I really feel in the current economic conditions, it's just not the thing to do. Okay. Item number 5. And this will be the last one that I know is marketed quite frequently. Oh, no, there's actually 6. Okay. Item number 5 is going to be blocking mats. So blocking mats are convenient. I own blocking mats. I use blocking mats. And they're really not needed, though. You can use a towel on your table to block your sweaters and your shawls. You can use your floor if you have a big enough space with a towel to block your sweaters and shawls and things that need blocked. But as a beginning knitter, you're not knitting a sweater most of the time, and you're not knitting an elaborate shawl that will need washed and laid out and pinned and blocked. And blocking means to take a wet garment that you've soaked, lay it out into a specific position or size, and either just let it dry without pinning it, but so it's laid flat, or pin it. In the case of a shawl, if you want little points or waves across the bottom, you can pin it into that position to dry. And you do that by sticking those pins into a little mat or into a towel. You do not need blocking mats when you start learning to knit. You eventually may want them. They may make your life easier as you start knitting things that are garments. But when you start, you do not need to buy these things. Don't do it. Okay, last but not least are fancy yarn bowls. They are adorable. People who make pottery will make them. People who 3D print will make them. People who do woodworking will make them. But really, this bowl works just fine. You don't need to spend $30 on a fancy yarn bowl. Additionally, and I don't know who came up with this idea, but you will find yarn bowls and they will have holes in them. And they will be advertised as this is the cool thing to do. So, your yarn just stays in there and you pull the yarn through, you feed it through this hole and you pull the yarn through the hole, and it kind of works like its own yarn minder in that way. The problem with this that many new knitters do not consider is that if there's a hole in the side of the bowl and you put your yarn in it and you feed the yarn through the hole and you start to work with it, your project is now trapped over here and your yarn is now trapped over here unless you literally pull all of the yarn through the hole and reball it up, or you cut it. That's the only way to separate those two things. Once you start working on your project, if you feed the yarn through a hole in the side of it, don't do that. Even if you want to buy a really cool looking yarn bowl just because you want it, don't use that hole. Now, some yarn bowls have, a spot in the top that kind of comes down like a hook. And that allows you to kind of feed your yarn through this hook, but still release it from the bowl. It just acts as a guide. That is much more practical to use. But I still don't necessarily see the need for it when this bowl works just fine. Some people, you don't even really have to have a bowl. You can put your yarn in a project bag, and that will keep it on the floor next to your feet, and that will keep it from rolling all over the place as well. 6 things that I feel you absolutely do not need to buy as a new knitter. You now have everything you need and everything you don't to start your project coming up for the tutorials. So head out to the store. You've got 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Yes, I'm going to release this, then it'll be a week, and then I'm going to release a normal episode, and it will be a week, and then the first tutorial will come out. So you have 2 weeks to go and buy these things if you need to buy them. Pick the color you want for your yarn. That will be fun and exciting. I always find that part exciting. And join me for episode 1, where you will learn to cast on. If you would like a printout of the things we talked about today, you can find that on my website. I just put together a little printout that says these are the items you need to start knitting. And here's some check boxes so you can check them off to make sure you have all of them. There's a little space to put notes. It's free. It's on the website. It's under handouts. And as we go through these tutorials, there will be more handouts. So that part of the website will grow. So check back there. I just thought it would be fast, convenient. You don't have to print them out. You can save them to your phone as a PDF and just show up at the store you're going to buy these things from and mentally check them off if that's how you want to do it. But I thought it would be convenient for you to have something to go back and look at without having to take notes or bring up this whole episode. So the website is www.mixedtapefiberarts.com, just like the name of the channel here. And it will be easy for you to go pull those up. And you won't be missing anything that way when we start our tutorials. So thank you everyone for joining me today. If you stuck through both parts of this, I really appreciate you. It would really, really help me out and the channel out if you would like the episode so more people will see it and that these tutorials are coming up for them. And if you hit subscribe, of course, you won't miss any of the tutorials that are popping up in the future or any episodes of the regular vlog that are going to be coming up on the channel. So again, thank you. I look forward to seeing you in the tutorials. Have a great day and happy yarn adventures.